Human research outside of protocol. In the fall of 2006, I interpreted in the dream state with vivid accuracy that I was under hyper-surveillance for human research at the local university in which I was registered as a sophomore studying philosophy and anthropology. I did not give it much thought at the time because I understood the research as benign and strictly controlled by regulated protocol that protects the subject of research, in my case, a severely disabled student continuing his education for hopes of returning to some useful position in society. Although I was not an unwilling participant, I was not contractually bound to their observation of me, or did I have anything to hide, and thought it interesting that I would be a candidate for the better good. Unfortunately, Mary began to withdraw from her normal happy self, and I did not know that she too was a target of research even though she was not registered at the school but always joined me when she could in an empty seat or just to enjoy the activities at the school such as art exhibits, plays, concerts, and open public discussion groups on any given subject. In my younger days, I spent a lot of time in my father's primate laboratory, which I actively participated in animal research, much of which I thought cruel but necessary in order to gather research in medicine to save future human lives. We too followed strict rules of protocol and went beyond the rules by making the animals as comfortable as possible during experimental surgery, such as organ transplants, with the idea of operating on primates first with a new procedure or theory instead of live human patients. My father's lab was also used to experiment on cadavers, but my father would never let me take part in the experiments. I remember one evening late, my father told me that the university had acquired a gorilla that in like years was about my age, and took me to comfort the animal because he seemed to be highly depressed. So we did and fed the gorilla bananas and oranges, and he would smile when we would talk to him kindly, just as if talking to another human being. The poor animal was locked in a tight stainless steel cage for its own protection and did not have much room to move around, and I felt empathy for him while maintaining my denial that he would be destroyed after the experimentation. Again, we thought we were saving lives, and still today I thought our work was a necessary evil for the better good of mankind and still feel that way today. On another occasion, I was assigned to assist on the weighing of a baboon that was naturally ill-tempered. The procedure required to first weigh yourself, then hold the animal in your arm, and step back onto the scale, deducting your own weight, giving a true body weight of the subject of the experiment. Baboons have large canine teeth with large, crushing jaws to match, and are highly dangerous animals that must also be kept in a small cage for the experimenter's protection. This particular baboon had gone through the procedure of being weighed many times, which was the cranking of the cage wall together slowly to hold the animal against one of the walls of the cage so it could be given an injection for sleep. Once unconscious, the cage uncranked and opened after the animal was given the sleeping injection. My father instructed me to crank the cage walls together as he drew the sleeping medicine from a vial with a hypodermic syringe. I cranked the cage slowly as the baboon reached out at me and tried to clamp its massive jaws on my hands. Once the cage was collapsed together and the baboon was stabilized in a way he could not move, my father cleaned its arm with an alcohol swab and lifted the syringe to the animal's arm, and just before the needle entered the skin of the baboon, he collapsed as if already asleep, hoping to fool us. So when I opened the cage and lifted him out to weigh him, he could make his escape. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that humans would be experimented on and knowingly bring harm to the subject, but this is my story, and it is as true as the log Chinese lab experiments performed by the Japanese on Chinese prisoners of war on live human subjects, the nerve gas test on live conscientious objectors drafted into the army to see how much concentration of nerve gas was lethal determined when a soldier died, and as real as the LSD experiments on heroin addicts in prison who were promised and given a fix after being injected and observed after the LSD test. Mary's condition became worse. She would no longer come with me to the university and stopped eating and finally stopped drinking liquid or communicating. Before her demise, she complained about being watched and that we had routine helicopter visits directly over our farm at low altitudes. But I was still in denial that anyone would be so interested in me and what I do. I guess my working in primate experiments rationalized my thoughts that a university would be beneath these kinds of things of doing harm knowingly to the subjects of research. I called an ambulance finally, and she was institutionalized and was declared a ward of the state, and I was told that she may never recover. Like I said, I received all the signs that danger was lurking, but was in a state of denial, never to expect that domestic surveillance would grow so big and go finally after several clairvoyant slaps in the face. I acted on my premonitions and went to the person's office that had been trailing Mary, and I, along with what I called Cubit gang members, a new plan to protect the university from harsh fines of discrimination, and carried with me only by memory every detail, exactly as it happened on the exact day over the previous 12 months, and every time she accessed a medical file, sent an email that concerned me, talked about me on the phone, etc. I knew nothing more about her except when she stuck her nose into this mystic's business by way of eidetic flashes of personal intrusion that could be seen clearly in my mind's eye. Any clairvoyant worth his/her weight would never think of intruding into someone else's life. But pity the person who is so bold to stick their noses into a clairvoyant's business with bad intent. This is not the case or retribution, but one of self-preservation, usually ignored as a welcome warning and just a nuisance by the intruding party unless it is a continued bombardment of personal space. When it gets this bad, where a group of people are surrounding you, orchestrated by another, you have to intervene as nicely as you can before they bring harm to you or themselves. I approached her office with caution and respect and sat down and said, "Look, I have been having a lot of problems here lately with my professors and so on, and I know all my problems are coming from this office. After all, this is a university, not the gin mill down the street. Smart people hang out here. Keep in mind my grade point average was 4.0 at the time, and my disability is limited mobility. I have more stainless steel in my body than I have skeletal bone." She jumped from her seat to standing in a frightened rage and told me to leave her office immediately, which I was happy to do, thinking that finally her and the others would leave me be, and mind their own business. Later, I filed a formal ADA complaint and simply said the university's quality assurance program was hardwired to favorable responses. I also followed through with police reports that were destroyed, and again months later, after episodes of retaliation, reported to the police again, who ignored my complaints. This was in 2007 after the Virginia Tech massacre. Sung Hoo Cho killed 32 people and wounded 25 others at the Virginia Polytechnic Institute at State University, who is like me, a philosophy major, disabled. And I just came back from China after working there for 2 years. Finally, after all reasonable complaints of due process went to the university administrator that had been working my case, and I had made straight demands if the action did not stop, I remember saying as I thought of the Civil Rights Office, there is a team of lawyers foaming at the mouth to get in here. This was a big mistake that I did not realize at the time, because now the school thinks I am suing for monetary damages, when all I was trying to do was get my diploma and leave. Little did I know that the Bush Civil Rights Department had changed their attitudes concerning disabled students and considered any lawyer pursuing such a claim as a commies or socialist. Little did they know how they contributed to the rise in campus violence and deaths for not pursuing each case. The next week, February 14, 2008, another mass shooting happened on the Northern Illinois University campus. Stephen Kazmierzak shot multiple people, killing 5 and injuring 21 before committing suicide. As I watched the televised news, the fellow went through the same thing I did. However, the hypersurveillance drove him insane, just as it did the Virginia Tech shooter. So being the oldest kid in the class, I had to step up and went to the local FBI office and explain what was going on. Little did I know that the university hosted the FBI Academy, and billions of dollars for research had been allocated to the university for anti-terrorism domestic surveillance program mandated by George W. Bush. And now I was the #1 suspect. The retaliation and high-tech surveillance only intensified and followed me on my personal computer, every email, telephone call, and satellite tracking, and anyone associated with me on and off campus. I was still visiting Mary in the hospital, and her condition seemed to worsen, and she continued to complain about being watched and reminded me on several occasions when I was being trailed on campus, but I ignored her stories, only to realize at a much later date even the helicopters flying over our farm were tracking our movements. It was hard to accept that Mary was telling the truth, that we were both victims of human research outside of protocol and well outside terrorist threats. The act of being stalked while people hide in the social blind spot of social recognition was something Mary could see, but I could not, and if it were not for the election of Barack Obama and the hard work of his administration, I would be dead or doomed to prison for life, as well as many others, a direct causal effect of a covert anti-terrorism domestic program that had gone completely out of control. Gregory Odell, December 24th, 2008. San Antonio, Texas, U.S. of A.